Have you ever stopped to wonder why a simple six-pointed star stirs up so much fascination, and sometimes even controversy, across the world? We see it on flags, on synagogues, in jewelry, even in pop culture. But is it just a quaint emblem of heritage, or does it hide stories that reach far deeper, into mystery, magic, even warnings from prophets long ago? Today we're going to unravel the tangled history of what most people call the Star of David, and you might be surprised how far this humble hexagram stretches beyond the Jewish people, weaving through ancient cultures, alchemist experiments, secret rituals, and yes, the pages of the Bible itself. So stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll not only know where this symbol truly comes from, but you might also look at it with a very different set of eyes. The many names of a symbol. Let us start by clearing something up. Even calling it the Star of David is only one small piece of the puzzle. In Hebrew tradition, it's actually called the Magen David, which literally means Shield of David, not star. That name alone changes the story from something static and ornamental to something used in battle to protect and represent power. And here's where it gets interesting. While today the hexagram, the interlocking triangles, is almost universally tied to Judaism, that wasn't always the case. In fact, if we hop back through history, we'll find this shape popping up all over the place, long before it was stamped on Israeli flags or carved into synagogue doors. Echoes across civilizations. Look at the archaeological record. This simple geometric design, a hexagram, has been found in the art of Mesopotamia, in Indian temples, even etched on Roman architecture many times. It wasn't tied to religion at all. It was purely decorative, a pleasant symmetrical pattern. But here's a twist. Symbols, especially geometric ones, often absorb layers of meaning wherever they travel. In some Middle Eastern cultures, the six-pointed shape was believed to offer protection, like a cosmic shield warding off evil spirits. You can still find old amulets from Persia and Syria bearing the hexagram, entirely disconnected from King David. So how did it become Jewish? The curious story of David's name, one of the most intriguing and frankly poetic explanations, comes from Jewish rabbinic tradition itself. According to some rabbis, the origin of the Magen David is hidden in the very name David. Written in ancient Phoenician script, the letters that spell David, Dale, Vav, Dale, look strikingly like triangles. To Dalits, almost identical to small angular arrows with the Vav connecting them. Overlay them, and you accidentally create a hexagram. It is a beautiful idea, the king's own name becoming a visual shield that would later be carried by generations of warriors, worshippers, and wanderers. But like many oral traditions, it's hard to prove the story with hard evidence. Was it really about spelling David's name on soldier shields, or is that a poetic backstory added later? We can't know for certain. What we do know is that by the Middle Ages, Jewish communities across Europe were embracing the hexagram more openly. Real medieval examples here's where the history becomes tangible. During the medieval period, especially in places like Spain and Germany, we see Jewish communities placing the hexagram on their synagogues, manuscripts, and tombstones, not just as decoration, but as a marker of communal identity, like saying, this is who we are and who we've always been. Yet there's another side to this. The same symbol was also appearing in Christian cathedrals and Islamic art, often with no direct link to King David at all. In fact, many historians argue that medieval Jewish scholars might have picked up the widespread use of the hexagram precisely because it was already circulating in local cultures, admired for its symmetry and mystical implications. The mystical turn, alchemy, and Kabbalah. Around this same time, the hexagram started gaining a heavy layer of mystical meaning, thanks to the rise of both Jewish Kabbalah and European alchemy. Jewish alchemists and philosophers, some tracing their lineage back to remarkable figures, like Maria the Jewess of Alexandria, an early pioneer of chemical processes, began to see the overlapping triangles as symbols of powerful forces in balance. Think about it. One triangle points upward, symbolizing fire, spirit, aspiration toward God. The other points downward, representing water, earth, and the grounding pull of creation. When combined, They create a harmonious tension, a graphic of the mystical belief that heaven and earth are meant to unite. And these ideas didn't stay neatly within Jewish communities. Through trade, conquest, and scholarship, Jewish thinkers often influenced their Christian and Muslim peers. Many Islamic scholars in Spain, for instance, picked up alchemical concepts directly from Jewish teachers. The hexagram quietly passed from hand to hand, religion to religion. Closing this part, why it still grips us. So why does this matter today? Because it shows how a simple shape can carry wildly different meanings, depending on who's holding it. For some, it was purely ornamental. For others, it became a mystical tool to summon divine forces. And eventually, it evolved into a badge of identity for people who would wander the earth, clutching stories and symbols like fragile lanterns against the dark. In our next part, we'll dig into even more surprising chapters, including how the hexagram got tangled with the legends of King Solomon, why some claimed it had magical powers to control demons, and how it ultimately became a lightning rod for both faith and conspiracy theories. So don't go anywhere. This story is just starting to get strange. From Solomon to sorcery, a new layer of legend. Now let us step deeper into this web of history and legend and see how the hexagram became linked to some of the strangest stories in Jewish and even occult traditions. If you grew up hearing tales of King Solomon, you might know him as the wisest man who ever lived. But by the Middle Ages, Jewish and Islamic folklore had transformed Solomon into something even more mysterious, a kind of master wizard. According to these traditions, Solomon wielded a powerful signet ring engraved with a special symbol, often described as either a pentagram or a hexagram. It was said that this ring gave him control over demons, allowing him to build the temple in Jerusalem by commanding supernatural forces. Imagine that for a moment. The very house of God constructed by demons compelled to obey a sacred symbol. Whether you take these stories literally or as colorful moral parables, they fed centuries of fascination. Medieval grimoires, the magical handbooks of Europe, frequently credited Solomon with secret knowledge of how to bind or banish spirits. And more often than not, the illustrations of these rituals featured hexagrams either drawn on parchment or etched into protective amulets. Real historical example, magic manuals. One of the most famous examples is the Key of Solomon, a book that began circulating widely in Europe around the 14th century. While probably not actually penned by Solomon, it claimed to reveal rituals for summoning angels, binding demons, and unlocking hidden treasures. The diagrams inside, packed with 6-pointed stars and intricate Hebrew inscriptions. What is remarkable is how this Jewish-rooted symbol became adopted by Christian and even pagan occultists who had little direct connection to Judaism itself. It was like the hexagram became a universal shorthand for mystical authority, meanwhile in Jewish communities. But back in the everyday lives of Jewish communities, the hexagram was evolving into something far more down-to-earth, a proud communal emblem. By the 17th century, many European Jewish communities were using it on flags and official seals. The Jewish community in Prague, for instance, received royal permission to fly a banner bearing the hexagram alongside the city's own coat of arms. It was no longer just a mystical glyph, it was a statement of civic identity. You can almost picture the contrast. In smoky candlelit rooms, mystics traced hexagrams in books of shadowy spells, while outside in bright town squares, Jewish elders hoisted banners marked with the same shape, declaring this is who we are. The rise of Zionism and the modern Israeli flag. Fast forward to the late 19th century, and the hexagram's journey took yet another turn, as Jewish thinkers and leaders began to dream of a modern return to their ancestral homeland. They needed a symbol that would rally scattered communities around the world. The Zionist movement seized on the Magen David, not because it had been an eternal Jewish emblem from time immemorial, but precisely because it had, by then, become so recognizable. It was familiar, simple to draw, and already deeply associated with Jewish gatherings and hopes. When the modern state of Israel was declared in 1948, the new flag proudly carried a blue hexagram at its heart, framed by two stripes echoing the traditional prayer shawl. In just a few generations, a symbol that had once shared space with Islamic and Christian art, magical treatises, and medieval architecture had become uniquely tied to Jewish national identity. Pause for reflection. What symbols mean to us here is something worth thinking about. Symbols like this aren't just abstract shapes. They're containers for centuries of stories, fears, dreams, and sometimes even horror. When Jews were forced into ghettos or dragged to concentration camps, the Nazis made them wear yellow badges often shaped like the Star of David, twisting a mark of faith into a tool of humiliation and terror. And yet, after the war, survivors reclaimed it, the same star that once marked them. For death became stitched on the flag of a resurrected nation. It's almost like humanity itself, scarred, battered, misused by evil, but still capable of standing back up and saying, I belong to a story bigger than my wounds. Real modern story. Tattoo of survival. I once heard about a Holocaust survivor who, after liberation, chose to tattoo a Star of David right over the number the Nazis had burned into his arm. He said it was his way of taking control, reclaiming both his body and his story. That's the paradox of powerful symbols. They can be wielded by tyrants, misunderstood by outsiders, or embraced by hearts desperate to remember who they are. Conspiracies and strange theories, of course, because the hexagram carries so much weight, it's also attracted countless conspiracy theories. Some claim it's secretly tied to global cabals, shadowy banking networks, or hidden satanic cults. Usually these theories cherry-pick bits of folklore, ignore thousands of years of actual history, and mash everything into sensational fear porn. Yet ironically, the same pattern that conspiracy theorists fear is also traced by children learning Hebrew prayers, and by families hanging tiny blue stars over their doorways at Hanukkah. It is a vivid reminder that what you see in a symbol often depends on what you carry inside your own heart. So where does this leave us? A humble geometric figure that has been everything from a royal emblem to a wizard's sigil, from a mark of genocide to the centerpiece of a modern nation's flag. In our final section, we're going to pull all of these threads together, asking what the long, often painful journey of the Magen David teaches us about identity, resilience, and the deep human need to wrap profound truths in simple shapes. Symbols are more than just lines, so here we are, after thousands of years, countless migrations, massacres, rebirths, and revolutions. A simple pattern of two interlocking triangles has been a badge of pride, a tool of mysticism, a mark of genocide, and a banner of national rebirth. The Star of David, or the Magen David, the Shield of David, shows us something profound. Human beings need symbols, not because ink or stone or cloth has magic power, but because our hearts do. When we look at a six-pointed star, or a cross, or a crescent moon, or even a flag, we're not just seeing lines and shapes. We're seeing all the tears, triumphs, prayers, betrayals, and hopes of the people who carried it before us. That's why these things can make us weep, or rage, or stand up a little straighter. What the modern world misses. We live in a world that's often suspicious of deep symbols. We prefer things that are instantly explained. I mean, a logo, a brand, something you can digest in 3 seconds and scroll past. But symbols like the Magen David are different. They're heavy because they carry centuries of struggle and memory. They refuse to be shallow. They invite us to slow down and wonder, what does this mean? Not just for history, but for me. Modern Israel and old prophecies. Look at Israel today, a small country about the size of New Jersey, yet it dominates global headlines. Some see this purely through politics. Others can't help but sense echoes of biblical prophecy, the idea that somehow, despite impossible odds, these ancient people returned to the land promised to Abraham under a blanket of stars. Whether you believe in divine prophecy or just historical grit, the fact is breathtaking. Name another people exiled for nearly 2,000 years who returned speaking their ancestors' tongue, reviving fields their great-grandparents once tilled, and praying in synagogues their forefathers could only dream of. Personal story, a tourist in Jerusalem. A few years ago, I met a young backpacker from South Korea in Jerusalem. He wasn't Jewish. In fact, he didn't know much about Judaism beyond the basics. But he told me standing by the Western Wall, where millions of Jews weep, pray, slip little folded notes into ancient stones, he suddenly felt history pressing on him. He said, "It's like everyone here knows they're part of a story bigger than themselves. Where I come from, we chase success, money, likes. But here, they chase memory." I've never forgotten that, because maybe that is what all of this, from Solomon's rumored seal to the battered flags of Holocaust survivors to the modern Israeli Air Force insignia, is really about. A people who refuse to forget. How this resonates with us today, so what does that have to do with you and me? You might be thinking, interesting, but I'm not Jewish. Why should I care about an old hexagram? Here's why. Because deep down, we're all carrying symbols. They might not be printed off flags or worn around your neck, but they're written in your mind and your habits. The stories you tell about where you came from, the values you cling to when everything feels lost. These are your shields, and the Jewish story, especially seen through the lens of the Magen David, is a testament to the power of knowing who you are, of refusing to let history or hatred strip away your essence, of carrying forward your ancestors' dreams even when the whole world seems to plot your erasure. Real modern example. College students wearing stars today. You'll see Jewish college students sometimes wearing small Star of David necklaces, even on campuses where anti-Semitism is rising again. Why do they do it? Because for them, it's more than jewelry. It's a quiet declaration. I will not be erased. My people's story matters. I belong. In that sense, the Magen David is less about ancient kings or mystical powers and more about ordinary courage. The courage to keep remembering, hoping, and building, no matter how many times history tries to break you. Personal takeaway, the lesson for all of us. So if you take one thing from this entire exploration, let it be this: your story matters. The symbols you hold, whether they're tied to faith, family, or a set of hard-won principles, are worth preserving. We live in an age obsessed with novelty, but maybe, just maybe, we need more ancient memory, more respect for long arcs that stretch beyond our own lifespans. Because when storms come, and they always do, it is the roots that run deepest that hold strongest. Ending, a gentle invitation, so here's my invitation to you. Think about your own Magen David. It might not be a star or even anything visible, but what's the core story you refuse to give up on? What hope would you carry across deserts and through centuries, no matter who tried to tear it from you? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because sharing these reflections isn't just algorithm fuel. It is how we weave ourselves back into something bigger, older, and more beautiful than any of us alone. And if you found value in this journey, consider subscribing. Together, we'll keep exploring the hidden stories and ancient echoes that might just change the way you see your own life.